So you have a teenager and you want what's best for them, but sometimes you just don't know what to do. I mean, we've all been there, right? Well, welcome to How to Be the Parent That Your Teenager Needs You to Be, where with each episode we explore the issues, the concerns, the questions, and the challenges that you face as a parent with a teenager. Well, today is week 5 of our no blaming, no complaining, and no justifying challenge. And today we're going to be talking about the power of triggers and transitions. So let's get started. Well, hello again, everyone. My name is Jim White, and I'm an author, coach, and the founder of the Family Enrichment Academy. And in today's episode of How to Be the Parent That Your Teenager Needs You to Be, we're going to talk about triggers and transitions in the context of our 6-week challenge around no blaming, no complaining, and no justifying. But before we get to that, I did have a couple of items that I wanted to note. First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank you for your commitment to growing and being a better parent. I mean, a growth mindset is just going to be critical to getting through these teenage years. And actually, that growth mindset, that's the foundation of our community of family heroes. Now, if you're not familiar with our community, be sure to check out episode 1 of this podcast, where we do a little introduction to the FEA Hero community. Now, the second thing I wanted to mention was that I do have a free resource for you. I have 10 questions that you should never ask your teenager. Think of these as like conversation killers. And then I also have 10 great questions. These are the conversation starters. Now, I put this together because one of the most common questions I get from parents is, how do I get my teenager to open up and ask and to talk more? And the answer is to ask better questions. So this is a free resource. There's a link in the show notes, or you can go to our website, familyenrichmentacademy.com, and right there on the homepage, you can download this free resource. So be sure to check that out. So let's go now to our topic for today, which is the idea of transitions and triggers, and how this applies in our 6-week challenge. So just a quick recap. If you remember, our challenge is around no blaming, no complaining, and no justifying. And this is a mindset challenge, right? We're trying to be a little bit more aware of where our mindset is, and if we are in those, like blaming, complaining, or justifying, are just signals that we're coming from a fearful mindset. And so we're trying to be aware of that, and then looking for opportunities to shift that mindset if we catch ourselves in that place. And we've talked about that in the first 4 weeks. But today it's going to be a little bit more proactive and intentional about shifting our mindset or being aware of our mindset. And here's what I mean by that. So rather than just finding ourselves in a circumstance where we're complaining, let's say, the goal today is going to be to set up some triggers and also to be intentional about it, transitions to where we can sort of set the stage to where maybe we don't drift into that complaining mindset or that blaming mindset. So again, we're going to be more proactive and try to prevent some of this from happening. So let's talk about triggers first. So a trigger, it's a lot of times we think about triggers in a negative way. You know, something happens and it pushes your button, if you will, and it pushes you to be frustrated or angry. Let's say a traffic jam is an example of a trigger that might push you into frustration. Well, today we're going to talk about setting up some positive triggers. What I mean by that, one example might be in the context of this challenge. Let's say every time you walk into a building, you walk through a doorway into a building, that walking through that doorway becomes a trigger, and you say to yourself, okay, while I'm in this building, I'm not going to complain, blame, or justify. So again, you have that positive statement that you say to yourself that's triggered by the fact that you walked into a building. So that's an example of a trigger that you could use. Another one, and I use this one actually, on your phone you can set alarms. And with the alarm, you can put a little bit of text with that alarm. So I have on my phone, for example, an alarm that goes off at 10 in the morning. And on that alarm, mine, what it says right now is, who needs me to be at my absolute best right now? And so that's just something that pops up. It's a trigger, if you will, something that just pops up, and it reminds me about my commitment to trying to serve others. So you could do the same thing with your phone. Set up a trigger, set up an alarm, and maybe on the alarm it says, remember not to complain, blame, or justify today. Something like that. So that's another example of a trigger and how you could use that in the context of this challenge. So think about and see if you can set up a few of those for yourself. Now, the second thing I wanted to bring up is the idea of transitions. So anytime you move from one activity to another is an example of a transition. And part of what I would throw out is the idea of being very intentional about that transition. Let's say, for example, you're picking your son up or your daughter up after school. And so there's going to be a transition. When they get into the car, you're going to transition to the ride home. And so as you're sitting there in the parking lot, for that minute or two prior to them getting into the car, again, have an intention statement of some kind. You can say to yourself, okay, on this ride home, I'm not going to complain or blame. No matter what my son or daughter says, I'm not going to shift into complaining or blaming. So you sort of set your intention before you go into that transition. Another example would be stepping into your work environment. As you get out of the car and you're walking into your work environment. Let's say if you go to the office, again, have an intention statement, and in the context of this challenge, around complaining, blaming, or justifying. So again, you could say something like, my intention today is to not complain or blame no matter what is said to me. See how that works? So the idea is that as you go through these transitions, it's almost like a trigger too. It's use them as a way to remind yourself about the goal of today's challenge. So those are your couple of things to work on for this week as you move into this final week of the challenge. Okay, see if you can do that. So again, before we sign off, I just want to remind everybody that I do have that free resource for you, those 10 questions you should never ask your teenager, along with those 10 great questions, the conversation starter. So be sure to click that link or visit our website and download that link for you, or that resource for you. As always, it's truly an honor to be able to serve and support you as you move along your parenting journey. And remember, until next time, that a change in perspective changes everything.